and thanks for joining us at this virtual Lynda Shaw lecture. We're so pleased that we were able to move forward with this annual lecture despite the pandemic. We'll begin in a few moments. We're just waiting for a few more people to join. But I did want to ask everyone except the hosts and the Shaw family members to turn off their videos and audio and refrain from using the chat during the presentation. You may also want to change your view to speaker view. You can do that by clicking on the three dots at the top of your profile and choose speaker view so that the person in the main screen should be the speaker. Also at the end there will be a Q&A, and you can then turn on your video and raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Okay, now for the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Wuk, and Attawandaron peoples, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. I would now like to introduce Dr. Tony Stratman, who will speak about the Lynda Shaw Lecture Series.
Thanks, Leslie. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tony Stratman, and I'm the chair of Mechanical Materials Engineering here at Western, and I was a classmate of Lynda Shaw. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 30th Annual Lynda Shaw Memorial Distinguished Guest Lecture Series. This lecture series was established as a tribute to Lynda Diane Shaw, a 21-year-old mechanical engineering student who died tragically on Sunday, April 15th, 1990, when returning to Western University to complete her third-year engineering exams. Lynda was a graduate of Centennial Secondary School in Brampton, Ontario. She had distinguished herself as an Ontario Scholar and was a winner of the school's Proficiency Award in Mathematics and Accounting. She entered Western with an admissions scholarship in 1987 and served for 2 years on the Mechanical Engineering Club executive. Those who are privileged to know Lynda will remember her smile, her dependability, and her enthusiasm. She was a good student, a capable leader, and a committed friend. As part of our tribute to Lynda, an annual award has been established for a deserving third-year mechanical and materials engineering student who's recognized for having many of Lynda's qualities. Last year, the award was presented to Isaac Clapp, and I'd like to recognize Isaac. I think he's in attendance at this lecture, so congratulations, Isaac. Our sincere hope is that these lectures and awards inspire and motivate excellence in the engineering and scientific community. Today, we're honored to have Lynda's mom and her husband with us. I'd like to welcome Lynda's mother, Carol Taylor, her husband, Murray, Lynda's brother, Graham Shaw, and children, Sarah, Thomas, and Aaron. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce Julia Thomas, the current president of the Women in Engineering Student Club, who will introduce this year's guest speaker, Lauren Lake.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Professor Stratman. My name is Jules Thomas, and I'm the current Women in Engineering Club president, currently studying civil engineering and business in my 4th year of study. It is my pleasure to introduce this year's speaker, Lauren Lake, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Bridget, an app that helps manage the communication between teams and individuals on construction sites. Lauren holds a degree in civil structural engineering from Western University and was named to the 2019 Forbes Manufacturing and Industry 30 Under 30 list, as well as the Best of Canada Forbes Under 30 Innovators list. In addition to her work, Lauren is an active mentor to young women in construction and engineering. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Jules, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's just get this up. And let me know if you can see that okay. Is that working? Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited to be here. I attended every single Lynda Shaw Memorial lecture back in my day at Western. And so it is especially exciting and a huge honor to be here today. I'd also like to thank Lynda's family for participating and being here with us. It means a lot to me and it means a lot to the entire Western community. So today I'm going to talk about choosing to challenge the status quo. And I'm going to do that by telling you the story of a business that I started while I was a student at Western. And that company is called Bridget. And we are a construction technology company. It was founded by me and my business partner, Mallory, who you'll see here. And as I said, we were students at the time, and our goal was to graduate university and be able to work for ourselves. So it was a big, exciting time as we finished our 4th year of university, trying to get this business started on the side. So I'm going to talk about the story of Bridget, how this whole business came to be, and I've kind of broken it down into 5, I'm calling them choose to challenge moments. So 5 of the top barriers that we faced in all of the ups and downs of starting a business, and reflecting on those and looking at how that has actually helped shape a culture of diversity in our business today. At the end, we're going to have some time for Dean Coley to join us. We're going to do some Q&A. So if anyone has any questions along the way, you can go ahead and use the chat. We will monitor that as we go, and we will answer questions at the end. So I'm going to rewind back to 2012 and how this whole business got started and how I ended up meeting my business partner, Mallory. I had applied to this program called the Next 36. Pretty much it was an entrepreneurship program designed for undergrad students. The idea was that if you got into the program, they would give you some money, some resources, some mentorship to get a business started. So I had applied to the program, I ended up getting in, and that is how I met Mallory. Coincidentally, we were both Western students, but we never had met each other before. She was studying her HBA at Ivy. I was in engineering. We had just never really crossed paths, but we ended up getting paired randomly together to start a business. So that's a pretty weird way to start a company. Typically, you would start a business with someone that you had known for a long time, you had worked with before. In our case, it was more or less fate. We were just put together, and somehow, I always say the stars must have aligned on that day because it was just a great fit from day one. We were very much on the same page. We wanted to figure out, can we start a business through this program, and can we figure out a way that once we graduate, we can continue with this business post-graduation. So we're in this program, we decide, okay, what's this business that we're going to start? So I started talking about my experience as a co-op student at Western. I was lucky enough to work for my uncle's construction company as a co-op student. So there's a picture of me back in 2007 working on a construction site. And this was a company that my grandfather had actually started that my 2 uncles now run. And as a co-op student, I was given the opportunity to go and visit all of these construction sites and get some of that hands-on experience. So I was talking to Mallory about this and I said, it's kind of weird that all of these construction sites that I visited as a student, none of them use technology. It's all pen and paper, it's all clipboards and Post-it notes. Maybe there's some sort of opportunity there. Maybe we could bring some sort of technology product to the construction industry. And she said, oh, that's really interesting because my grandfather was in construction. And so it was just another coincidence. We both had families in the industry. We both had some interest in the construction industry. And then I had studied civil engineering and had spent some time on site. And so we said, maybe this is the path that we should go down. So we started to pitch this idea to people within the tech sector saying, we want to start this business. We think we can bring technology to the construction industry. We don't really know what it's going to do, but we think there's probably some sort of opportunity there. And this was kind of our first choose to challenge moment. This is the feedback that we kept hearing. People said, oh, that's a great idea. That makes sense in theory, but this will never, 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 never work. Don't even bother. The construction industry is too old school. They're never going to want to use technology. And we said, that's possible, but we should probably go and prove that for ourselves. And so we started what we called crane hunting. And we quite literally just drove around London, Ontario, looking for cranes off in the horizon. We would drive towards these cranes until we ended up on some sort of construction site. We would bring Timbits and coffee, like true Canadians, and we would more or less loiter around the kind of the gates of these construction sites, looking for people as they came on or off the site, hoping to catch them for 2 minutes. And we'd say, hey, do you have 2 minutes to talk? We want to know what's the most frustrating part of your job. What could we build for you that would help your day be better? And it was just asking these broad, open-ended questions that got people talking. And I think naturally people love the opportunity to vent and to complain about their challenges. And so we were just there to listen. We weren't there to say we know better or we have a better way of doing this, because we didn't. We were just trying to figure out what the problems were. And we heard problem after problem after problem in all of these job sites that we drove to and visited. So you might recognize some of these buildings. This is London Hall on the left there, or Ontario Hall, what's the name? That was under construction when we were in school. And then the other building that I'm in front of there is the Ivy building, which was just nearing construction completion when we were in our final year of school. So these were sites that we got to know. We got to know the people on those sites, and we just kept going back and asking questions. And one of the problems that people brought up was this challenge of deficiency management. It's more or less issue tracking on a big job site. So there'd be all of these problems going on the job site. The project managers would be taking photos of these problems and trying to document who's coming back to the site when to fix all of these issues. And so they would do this manually with a pen and paper. At some point, they would put it into an Excel spreadsheet, kind of like you see here. And then they would email that out to all the different people, trying to figure out when to get all of these things finished. It doesn't sound like a big deal, except that on big projects, they would be doing this with 10, 20, 30,000 items. So you can imagine the scale of this spreadsheet and just the sheer volume of work that had to get done. This was one of the reasons why projects would often go over budget and over schedule. So this was kind of our first idea. We said maybe we could build some sort of app, software product that the project manager, using their tablet or using their phone, could walk through the job site and just do all of this in a much more automated way. Now was choose to challenge moment number 2, which was you can't start a tech business without a software background. Again, a very valid point. Mallory and I were not coming from software backgrounds, and this was a huge barrier for us at the time because we didn't have the capability to just go and build a product ourselves, but we also didn't have that much money to go and hire someone. So we were kind of caught in this in between, and it was really frustrating because we felt like we were onto something. We were visiting these job sites, we were getting great feedback. We felt like we had identified this problem that we could solve, but we couldn't go and build that product. So this was really frustrating, and we were trying to figure out what to do from here. Now, because we were part of this entrepreneurship program and we had won some money through some different pitch competitions and so on, we did have a little bit of money that we could invest, but we realized that we could only invest at one time, meaning we couldn't just go and hire someone to build this first product and risk getting it wrong. We had to be 100% certain, or as certain as we could be, that we were building the correct product because there wasn't really the ability to do it over. And so what we really focused our time on was validating that our idea was correct, that we were on the right path. And we did this in pretty basic ways. It started as just hand-drawn sketches in a notebook. These were some of our earliest mock-ups. I think we made these just in PowerPoint slides. I pulled these pages from my parents' basement. But more or less, we would print all of these pages out. We had dozens of them that showed every screenshot of this kind of visionary product. And we would drive back to those job sites. We would bring more Timbits and we would say, okay, now we want to show you our idea for this product. And we'd flip through with the project managers and say, okay, you're going to click here, and now you're going to click here, and now we're going to flip the page, and this is what you see next. And we started to get feedback on that. People would say, oh, that kind of makes sense, but this would need to be fixed and this would need to be changed. And we did this over and over again until we were really certain that what we had on paper made sense and we could start to actually build it. So we spent many months doing this before we ever wrote a single line of code. And by the time we had built this product or started to build this product, we had spoken to over 500 people in that research process. So it was quite extensive, and it was a lot of back and forth and just iterating on our approach. So we kind of got solidified on this. We knew that we were in the right direction. We had gotten lots of feedback. And we hired a first-year Waterloo Co-op student. We spent all of the money that we had to hire that student, and we built the first version of our product. We called this product Bridget Field. We launched it. We started to build the business. We started to gain customers. We had people that used the product, really relied on it, and these were all great signs. We started to be able to hire more people onto the team. We got some angel investment, which allowed us to grow the business a little bit further. And so it was very much this kind of step function of get some more customers, grow the team, get a little bit more investment from some different angel investors, and kind of rinse and repeat. But we got to the point where this was no longer really enough investment in the business. We needed to grow a little bit faster. And we had some great proof points, but we were still early stage. And we decided, let's go out and start pitching this to some venture capital investors. And let's see if we can raise a little bit more money. So we start doing this. We pitch all these investors, and we were not very successful. We kept getting no's. And that's to be expected. But the challenge that we faced was every time we got a no, it was for a different reason. So this person would say, oh, the industry is too small. This person would say, oh, you don't have a software background. So there was always a different reason. And so we couldn't really make heads or tails of why people were saying no. And we ended up talking to some different advisors and people about this challenge. And one individual said to us, and he kind of said, oh, I don't know if I should really say this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. And he said, is it possible that when you walk into pitch these VCs, you don't really fit the pattern? And is it possible that's part of the reason that people are saying no to you, and they're saying no for all of these kind of ancillary reasons? And so that was choose to challenge moment number 3. You don't fit the pattern. And this is something that is now widely studied. Only 2% of venture capital funding goes to women-founded businesses. And especially, this is especially true in the early stages, because in the early stages of a business, you don't have that many proof points to really show. More or less, you're pitching yourself as a founder, you're pitching yourselves as a founding team, and people are making a bet on you more than they're making a bet on your specific business, because there just isn't that much revenue yet. There aren't that many customers to validate this with yet. And so it's really hard because investors, they're in the game of recognizing patterns. They can see, I invested in someone 5 years ago. Now I see these new entrepreneurs and they kind of remind me of so-and-so. And so I'm willing to take that bet because I've seen how this plays out and I can kind of draw the comparisons there. When we went to pitch, they weren't expecting 2 young females in the construction tech space. And so it was hard for them to really place us and recognize any sort of pattern to match us to. So this was really difficult. And I think this was probably a defining moment for both of us because we were very used to problem solving. We were always facing problems, we were always figuring out a solution. But this was the first problem that wasn't really fixable. There was no way to just go and make this different. It really came down to who we were and the fact that these VCs were expecting 2 guys in hoodies to show up, and that's just, we just weren't those people. And so we kind of sulked about this for a little bit, and then we just said, you know what, we need to figure out how to get around this. And if pitching us as early stage founders isn't really the way, then we need to figure out how to pitch the metrics. Nobody can argue with numbers. And so that means we need to have more revenue. $100,000 in revenue, which I think is what we had maybe around that time, it's just not enough. And so we need to be in a position where we go back to these investors and we need our revenue to be so strong and so impressive that nobody can argue or question us then. We know we're going to be discounted right off the bat, and so we need to make up for it in all of these other ways. So at this point, we were working in a basement apartment. You can see a picture of it there. We turned it into a little sales den. And I think our team was around 7 people at this point. And we just started to build this very sales-focused culture. So everyone on our team was trained in how to make cold calls. It didn't matter if you were a software developer, you were picking up the phone and you were learning how to make those calls because the life of the business depended on it. And Mallory and myself in particular, that's kind of all we did all day. We made 100 calls every single day each. And we worked in this little 500 square foot apartment. I often sat right there in the laundry closet because it was the only place that was quiet enough for me to make my calls. And we just started to track our growth. At that point in time, investors were really looking for 20% month over month growth. So every month they wanted to see your revenue grow by 20%, which is pretty aggressive because every month that gets harder and harder to do as your base gets bigger. And so we put big pieces of paper up on the wall, you can see one there, and we would just start to color in with a Sharpie every single time we got a new customer, what amount of growth that provided us with. And we just hit that 20% number every single month without fail. It was all we cared about. And we got better and better and better at selling our product. We figured out how to find the right customers where we could have a higher price point. We figured out how to pitch the product where we could convert people at a better rate. And bit by bit, we started to build that traction. So when we went back to those investors, we were no longer at $100,000 We were more around $500,000 or $600,000 at this point, and we had done that very, very quickly within a matter of a couple months. So this was a huge turning point. We went back to those investors and we closed that capital. And so at that point, it was hard. Sure, they could think in their heads, oh, I don't know about this. This doesn't really fit our pattern. But they went and closed all of this revenue. So clearly something is working. And so that was kind of how we got around that problem. We raised our money and we started to invest in the business at a much faster pace. So now we got our own office space. We grew the team. We were able to invest in the product, broaden it. We started to sell all across the US. And at this point, we grew the business to several million in revenue. So we were no longer, in the hundreds of thousands, but we were, getting the 1, 2 million and so on, which was great. And that showed great progress. We grew the team to around 30 people. And then we started to hit the next barrier. It was all fun while it lasted. The next challenge was that we started to find more and more competitors. So initially when we launched our field product, it was pretty unique. It was very niche. We weren't really competing against anyone. And that changed pretty quickly. We had a couple big American competitors who started to have products that overlapped with ours. The main two were Autodesk, who many of you engineers would be familiar with, and Procore. And now the hurdle was, well, you can't compete against these multi-billion-dollar American competitors. And again, we didn't argue with this. We said, yes, that is probably true. And we didn't think it was a fight worth fighting. We could see that these companies had thousands or tens of thousands of employees. We had 30 people in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. And we just didn't really feel like it was the best use of our time or our money. But we said, well, what do we do from here? We don't really feel like this field product is necessarily the path forward based on how the market is evolving. And so if we're going to compete, if we're going to differentiate, we think we need to build another product. And so that's what we did. We went back and we started the research process again. This time it wasn't crane hunting. This time we went straight to the corporate offices of the largest general contractors in the US, because we wanted to understand at a higher level, if they were using all of these other products, like an Autodesk, like a Procore, what were the gaps that we could still possibly fill? So obviously Autodesk and Procore, they're great products, but they don't do absolutely everything. We knew that there had to be some sort of gap that we could still fill and hopefully be more complementary to those products versus trying to compete head to head. And that product idea came about very quickly. Mallory was in a meeting with a company in St. Louis, and the CTO said to her, every week we sit down as an operations team, the whole operations team, and we go through our workforce planning. And Mallory said, okay, well, walk me through what that looks like. And he said, we have spreadsheets, and we have a spreadsheet that has all of our people, all of our employees, hundreds and hundreds of employees. And we have another spreadsheet with all of our projects. And we try to figure out which projects need people at what time. And so project A needs a project manager and a site supervisor and a safety coordinator from this day until this day. And then this project is ending, so we have some people available here. And how are we going to match everyone to a project? How are we going to make sure that the person we're sending to this job is the right person, has the right experience, is in the right location, and so on? It was a completely manual process. They did it either in Excel spreadsheets or on big whiteboards, if you can imagine that, right up on the wall. And these are billion-dollar construction companies. These are not small shops. And they said, we've been looking for software to do something like this, but we just haven't found anything. And it's not really what Procore is doing. It's not really what Autodesk is doing. And he said, maybe this is an opportunity where Bridget could fill this gap. And that is where Bridget Bench was launched. It was very exciting to see the launch of our second product and just how different it was from the launch of our first. At this point, we had this team that was a much more well-oiled machine at this point. And so it wasn't 500 interviews that Mallory and I were going to. It took maybe 20 interviews to get this product to the point where we were confident in it. And it wasn't months and months and months of prototyping and all of these different processes. From start to end, it was probably about 6 months from the time we had that initial meeting to when the product was launched. And then the most exciting part was just how quickly the revenue grew. So on field, it was a much slower process. It wasn't a highly scalable business model. We were selling project to project to project, so it was very difficult. with Bench, part of what we wanted to do was build a much more recurring business model. So think of Netflix, the way that you can sign up and you have a subscription and it just keeps going and going and going. And so we were able to do that with this product. And the revenue that it took a year to do on Field, we had closed within the first 3 weeks on the new product. So it was staggering just how quickly this product grew. It was very exciting. So now the next challenge was, for me and Mallory being on the front lines every day, it was pretty obvious the traction we were getting with Bench and how it compared to Field. And to us, the path forward was very much, let's go all in on this new product. But to others, it was, well, it's too risky to pivot away from something that is working. Because Field was working, it was a great business, but to us, it was not the business that we had set out to build. We had taken people's money as investment into our company, and for that, we needed to provide a really great return. And Field was a great business, but it wasn't going to provide the return that those investors were looking for. And we could see that, and we could see that the way the market was developing, it wasn't a business that was going to really lead us forward. And so we said, we need to put all of our eggs into this new basket, and that is the Bench product. And so we had some conversations around this. It's too risky, so on and so forth. I think to Mallory and to me, it was very clear from the beginning that sure, you could call it risky, but the riskier thing is to do nothing, because we see that there's this opportunity in front of us. If you really want to talk about risk, the risk is to avoid facing reality that the Field product is no longer what it once was. And so we put all the eggs into that Bench basket and kind of went full steam ahead, really hoping for the best. And so we're going to fast forward to today. The Bridget Bench product has been in market for about 1.5 years, just under 2 years. And the growth has been really, really exciting. We now focus entirely on the Bench product, and the bet has paid off. We have grown by leaps and bounds. We are 70 employees now, which is a little bit hard to believe. We've raised $20 million in capital, the majority of that because of the Bench product and kind of the early success there. And with the launch of the new product and with the revenue and the growth that we've seen, we've made the Globe and Mail top fastest growing companies for 2 years in a row. I think the even more exciting piece is that what started as a challenge with our two competitors, Autodesk and Procore, Autodesk has now invested in Bridget, and we are integrated with their construction, they call it the construction cloud. So we're actually a portfolio company of Autodesk's. We now link into all of their customers, and the same with Procore. Procore didn't invest, but we have built a partnership with them. So the majority of our business actually comes through Procore now. We're featured on their app ecosystem. We have an integration with them. And so our two biggest competitors are now our two biggest allies and channels and supporters. And that feels like a huge breath of fresh air. It has completely changed the way that we can grow our business. So all of this to say, as we look back on Bridget, I think that the core theme is that everything we've done has always been, I guess, quote unquote, unconventional. So we were female founders in a male-dominated space. We were selling technology to, a very traditional industry. We were software founders, but without a software background. And so everything we did was a little bit outside of the norm. And I think it's funny to think back on all of these challenges. And at the time, they were all seen as these huge, terrible things. Oh, you don't have a software background. This is never going to work. When we look back on that in hindsight, we hear the exact opposite feedback. Now we hear from investors, isn't that interesting that you didn't have a software background? And that probably actually forced you to go and validate your business and really take this, problem first approach rather than just building something and hoping for the best. And so it's kind of interesting when all is said and done, there's always a silver lining to what is viewed very negatively at first. And I think this has really related and really shown itself in the way that we've built our team and the way that we've cultured diversity at Bridget. So because Mallory and because both of us don't fit the mold as tech founders, I think early on we never expected others to fit that mold either. We were very willing and very open-minded in the beginning when we were hiring our first team members to look for people that came from all different backgrounds. And that allowed us to capture a very diverse early team right from day one. So most tech companies were looking for people that had a certain set of experiences. They were looking for people that had worked within a tech company before. We said, you know what, we don't really care about that. We're an early stage company. It doesn't really matter if you have a tech background. We don't have a tech background. We don't really care if you have a construction background. All of those things can be learned. The things that we can't really teach anyone are kind of the 3 core traits that we ended up hiring around. And that was work ethic, the ability to learn quickly, and resourcefulness. We said, if you have those 3 things, you can join this early stage company, because everything else we're kind of figuring out as we go anyway. And so this allowed us to pull people into our core team early on who are from all sorts of different backgrounds. So we had a lot of people join the team who didn't have tech backgrounds, who came from government, who came from hospitality, but all of them brought different perspectives. And this allowed us to have a lot of gender diversity right from the beginning, because we weren't just pulling people from the tech sector, which is already very male dominated. And so today, with our team, even though we're at the intersection of 2 very male-dominated industries, we're right in the middle of construction and tech. We have great gender diversity on the team, but even beyond gender diversity, we have diversity of educational backgrounds, diversity in cultures, languages, all of those great things that lead to a diverse team. So if we look at our board, our leadership team, and our overall team, we always hover right around 50-50, which is pretty unheard of in the tech world, and especially in the construction tech world. But I think a lot of this stems from kind of that unconventional approach and the fact that we were starting this company already from a bit of a different background. So as I think back on all of these barriers, you know, at the time, I'm sure that they were, you know, more devastating than they probably are in hindsight. But I think the way that we've always treated the barriers is they've always added fuel to our fire. Rather than take us down, I think they've only ever really amped us up. I think as soon as we heard someone say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, it made us want to prove those people wrong even more. So I think the thing that gets me up in the morning, at least, is this really deep-seated desire to prove all of those naysayers wrong. And I think that has allowed us to persevere through lots of these challenges. I always think of it as that fire in your belly, and every time someone says you can't do that, you can't do that, I think it just kind of gets us going to want to prove that wrong. And I think the other thing that I always think about, and this is a very big goal, but I think it's one worth aspiring to. When we think of all those patterns and, you know, not fitting the mold and being different, I would love to see maybe 10, 20 years down the road, if 2 young females could walk into an investor's office and pitch their business, and if that investor could say, you know what, those 2 remind me of Bridget, you know, way back when. I'm going to take that bet because I saw kind of how, you know, the story of Bridget evolved. I think that is the ultimate goal. Sure, you know, the business is great, but I think it's so much more than just the business and the revenue and the customers and all of those things. I think for us, it's proving that the unconventional approach can work, and that a team made up of kind of this ragtag team of people from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds can make it in the tech world, where that is seen as very different and very much outside the standard. So with that, we are right on time as I look at my clock. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone, and I'm going to welcome Dean Coley. He's going to join us for some Q&A. So again, if you have questions, please enter them in the chat, and we will monitor those as they come in, and we'll hopefully have time for a few questions before we get everyone out of here on time.
Also, people can put their videos on and raise their hand and ask the question personally if they wish.
Perfect.
So once Lauren's stopped sharing her screen, Dean Coley will join.
There we go.
Thank you, Lauren. I really loved that talk. It was incredibly inspiring, and I really loved the bit about the barriers just adding fuel to our fire. The contrarian in me, that really appealed to the contrarian in me. So I very much appreciated, and we weren't expecting any less, but it was still wonderful, and I'm sure everyone else in the audience was as inspired as I was.